abandoned ship.
Oh no!
Here we go!
Can I persuade you to join us for a drink? It's a tradition.
Here, here.
Jar Jar, homie, my main man, quickly. Before the Separatists attack, get into the escape pod.
Right! This is escape, then we're the pod.
Welcome back to Star Wars Escape Pod and a very special guest episode. We have Molly joining us, fresh off the Halcyon Legacy, and our co-host Blake, and we're just going to be chatting about this crazy experience at Walt Disney World and getting into all things Halcyon Legacy and a bit more Galaxy's Edge. So without further ado, let's get into it.
Another happy landing.
Welcome Molly, to Star Wars Escape Pod, and welcome back, Blake. I've been looking forward to this for a while. I know you've been.
I as well.
Yeah. So before we talk about the Halcyon, just so everybody kind of knows sort of where you're coming at as a Star Wars fan, how and when did you become a Star Wars fan? Like, what was your favorite Star Wars movie growing up? Like, maybe you can take a moment to talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll try to keep it brief. It's my favorite question. So I am one of the people who've been a fan since literally, can't even remember when I started. I really was a fan since birth. My dad is one of the Star Wars fans who, was there for the first movie and grew up on it. So he raised me and my siblings on it. And I'm a child of the prequels. So my favorite movie was definitely Attack of the Clones when I was really little, because I loved the Battle of Geonosis. And of course, as a female Star Wars fan, having Padme Amidala just going crazy at Battle of Geonosis was like, the perfect girl boss figure. So that was my favorite when I was younger. Yeah. My first movie I remember seeing in a movie theater, like I'm sure I saw other movies first, but the first one I remember seeing was Revenge of the Sith, because I was 5. And so I had to, like, when Anakin's on Mustafar burning, my dad had to like cover my eyes and I could like see it through his fingers.
No.
My older brother like ran out of the theater. Yeah, it was quite a time. So yeah, but so I was a little scared of watching that movie, but now it's one of my favorites. Yeah, so I've been on the journey with Star Wars forever. Saw of course the sequel films in the theaters. My family was actually the front page of our local newspaper before The Force Awakens.
Wow.
So
Nice.
I was quoted as saying that I liking Jar Jar when I was younger was a mistake, but I don't think it's a mistake anymore. I just had to look good for the paper.
Yeah.
Couldn't be caught lacking.
Didn't want to embarrass
those
yourself
days,
in front of the town, right?
Exactly, but was I singing? Yeah. Was I playing with my Jar Jar action figure the most growing up? Yes. And did I sing in a Jar Jar voice on Rock Band? Yes. So my journey with Star Wars has definitely been a lifelong thing. Of course, now I got to be the reason I'm here. I was on the Halcyon because I interviewed to get the job because I really wanted to be a part of it, and it was just it's been really fun. Now I write. I'm an editor for Screen Rant's Star Wars beat, so Star Wars really is my life, and I love The Mandalorian. That's my brand.
Wow.
So
Awesome. That's Yeah, that's great. And that's so cool that you get to sort of continue that Star Wars journey, in your follow-up career, with Screen Rant. That's super exciting.
Yeah, it's been quite a journey. Head to my Twitter if you want to read all about it. I won't bore you guys with the whole thing here.
Feel free to plug that if you want to.
Yeah, feel free. And any links that might be relevant to, for people to follow your stuff, just send them through and I'll put them down in the description box.
Awesome, thanks.
Yeah, and no problem. For people who don't know what Galactic Starcruiser is, or was, I guess, Are you able to just recap for those fans exactly what this experience was? Because I know personally I found it, and so have you, Blake. Like we've found that there has been a surprising amount of people, like fans that are of Star Wars, that just have no idea that this existed.
Which is mind blowing. So we've been even just the last few weeks, kind of getting ready for this specific podcast, just talking to people, bringing up the hotel, the experience, and they hadn't even heard of it before, which was bizarre. I guess because Josh and I are really involved with the fandom. Yeah, that we knew about it like the day it was announced.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is one of my favorite questions, and actually one of the jobs I used to do at the Star Cruiser is one of my most frequently asked questions. We'll get more into that later. But the Galactic Starcruiser, formerly known as the Star Wars Galactic Starcruiser, and the ship name known as the Halcyon, it was a 2-day, 2-night immersive experience, or a 3-day kind of technically 2-night immersive experience at the Walt Disney World Resort, not Disneyland, only Disney World, which is the one in Florida. I can see why there's confusion for that. And it opened it opened on March 1st, 2022. And it's just basically a 48-hour movie is really what I can liken it to. Is you're in Star Wars for 48 hours. You stay on the ship, which is of course the hotel aspect. I don't like to use the word hotel for the Halcyon because anybody who experienced it knows it's nothing like a hotel. It's basically like a cruise on dry land. And you get to be a part of a Star Wars journey. It involves a phone application that guides your journey, and you get to interact with all your fellow passengers, and then all, of course, like the working cast or the people who are leading the adventure, and then you got the cast like me or the crew members like me who kind of help to facilitate the smaller details. And yeah, really that's the best way to describe it, a 48-hour Star Wars movie that you get to star in. So it was an epic adventure.
Wow, that's it's super cool. I mean,
to me that sounds like a fan's dream. I know. Yeah. When we heard this announced, all I could all I could think of was this is something that, as a fan, is more what I've always wanted to do. I didn't think we'd ever pull it off.
Yeah, it's like playing a big Star Wars D&D game, but in real life.
Yeah, exactly. Where everything is fully interactive. People are properly playing characters and everything. It's like you are the hero of this story.
It was almost too good to be true. You know, like it's almost like this was we just didn't deserve this. You know, like
so that's where it went wrong.
Oh yeah, nobody can ever forget their first time stepping in the space. Mine, of course, was like formal, less formal, because I was getting a tour of the space before I started working, and I'll never forget when the door to the turbo lift or the elevator opens, and gosh, it was just like looking at the space. The atrium was the first thing I saw, and you know the chandelier, the way it smelled. Like I wish I could describe a smell. It's space not like dust. I know Disney has its smells, but the smell of the Halcyon was just like, oh, it's so good. I can't believe that was really like my everyday atmosphere for 8 months.
That's super cool.
I have to, especially looking back now, I have to pinch myself to be like I was normalized in that space. Like it was basically, I think I spent more time there than I did in my apartment when I was working. So yeah.
I guess it better smell nice if we're like it's an enclosed indoor experience for like 2 nights and 3 days, right? So like I would hope it's got some sort of
They built it next to a subway, so just pumping that bread smell in.
Respect to all the people who would, come in their what we call Galactic Vest, or their cosplays and outfits. Not everybody would cosplay, which is fine, because some people would come and they still didn't really know what it was when they were there. Which, like, it's just tricky to describe the experience if you don't go full in, as I'm sure you guys learned, because you're saying you did the research and still had a hard time finding stuff. It's hard unless you're watching vlogs and stuff like that.
Right.
But there would be some people
filtered
in their cosplays and it's layers. Yeah. People come in their cosplays and they're layered, and they're coming off of Batu, which is like, in the Orlando heat, and it's July.
Oh no.
And the smell was not very pleasant then. But, it is what it is. Our own costumes, our own outfits were long sleeves and pants year round. So whenever I had to stand on Batu, I was not smelling good, I'm sure, either.
Right.
Fair enough.
So
Yeah.
who was the target audience for this experience? Because, you know, when this thing was announced, the price was talked about a lot, you know, and you know, we're just kind of wondering, like, well, like, who was there any sort of conversation with the staff as to sort of the people showing up, you know, who's this audience that this is for, kind of thing?
Yeah. From really all the conversations I remember, it's everyone, which I know is going to sound like the yeah, of course answer, but the word you actually mentioned earlier was play. Like, you want to play in this world, and that was our biggest world. Biggest word. We just wanted everybody to feel like they could be a kid again to the most extreme degree. You know, be that kid who, if you saw the first Star Wars movie, was experiencing all of it for the first time, or a kid like me who grew up during the prequels and had, you know, little Star Wars spoon collectibles from their cereal boxes and we're playing with those. We really just wanted to kind of take any person at any age. And there's actually one spiel I used to give a little bit closer to the end of my time there. And what I would do is, while people were waiting to get into their launch pod to head up to ship, I would kind of just remind them of the tools they had and whatever. But one of the things I would say is, who's here because they love Star Wars? And then, you know, a bunch of people would raise their hands. And then I would say, who's here because you love someone who loves Star Wars? And then the other half of the people would raise their hands. And you know, I'd give this speech about how no matter where you come from, who you are, you can still be a part of this. Like, you don't have to know everything about Star Wars to have fun. So really, of course, we're targeting two different audiences, but trying to make it work at once. We're targeting the Star Wars fans who've been dreaming of something like this, and then people who are supportive of those Star Wars fans to kind of get them interested in the world. So I would say like a healthy mix of fans and non-fans, but really like all ages, of course, probably more so families as well. We had a lot of child activities. So
Right.
Did that make the immersion hard to pull off if you're having these people with such drastically different takes on it?
It depended voyage to voyage, because we would have different amounts of people who were like involved and not. Like I worked the May 4th voyage in 2023, and there was I think there was like maybe one or two parties who did not dress to the nines. Like, everybody there was, you know, hardcore cosplay, and it was one of the best experiences of my life. Like, that voyage was insane in the best way.
That sounds cool. I think that's probably what
it definitely was.
Sorry, I guess when we think of it in our heads,
No,
that's
you're
probably
fine.
what we picture is probably the May the 4th like day expedition. As opposed to, I don't know, September 3rd.
The endless vloggers, you know, the endless vloggers with the cameras. We just couldn't help, you know, because like, of course, all of the online material that you can watch on YouTube with all the influencers and such, etc. I mean, it's hard not to notice the amount of selfie sticks in the room. And I'm just wondering, like, you know, we were just kind of commenting on that. Like, did that ever sort of go away when the initial wave of like invitees sort of, you know, dispersed? And, you know, when you started getting like the regular experience for the guests and stuff, like
non-vloggers.
Was there sort of a decline in all of the recording on the phones and everything like that? Because that kind of breaks the immersion a little bit, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So what you guys are probably referencing are when we first opened. So yes, definitely like closer to March 1st. Those were mostly made for the purpose of bringing those media people on board. So that's why there are so many selfie sticks. I never saw that many because I didn't start until like early part of 2023, but I've heard stories passed down, you know, through generations of people who trained me and whatnot. And yeah, you know, selfie sticks never really stopped being a problem. Not in terms of volume, but you know, there'd always be that one person in the atrium with a selfie stick like extended so far up, and that would be my job. Like my team, we would have to go around and very politely say, please put your selfie stick down, because you know, the 8-year-old behind you can't see. So that kind of stuff is funny to get around because you still are 100% immersed. And I would definitely say, you know, it's tricky when somebody comes in a Mickey Mouse shirt and you're like, how do I approach this? And you know, stay in world. But we would just refer to him as the Womp Rat. So you know, there are definitely ways to get around it. I have to remember, there are so many clever ways my coworkers and I were able to talk about like the Disney parks, but in complete like Star Wars lingo. You know, I think we called like Epcot the wheel, and we're talking about like, yeah, you know, we go around the wheel and there's all these different places to, you know, get these libations. So like that, like we definitely were pushing some boundaries. Yeah, exactly. It was easy to do Hollywood Studios because that's just Batu, that's out a Black Spire Outpost. And if you're not in Black Spire Outpost like Galaxy's Edge, then you're just elsewhere on Batu. But the other parks were harder. The Womp Rat Kingdom was Magic Kingdom for me. You found ways to get around it, and honestly, it made it more fun when people weren't like immersed at times because you could help to ease them in. But the people who didn't really want to be eased into the immersion, that was the tricky part because then it's like you don't really know what to do. And for my job too, we dealt with a lot of helping people with their technology, and you really can't like Star Wars lingo that because if you don't talk in real world terms, they're gonna get frustrated and they're not gonna know what to do.
Just like
so like
really
if this poor
IT.
person just wants if this poor person just wants to know if they can get to their reservation they made at 50s prime time at Hollywood Studios, I can't be like, oh, what's Hollywood Studios? Like,
Right.
That's so rude. Like they just need help.
Well, especially if
so
it's like
we had
70-year-old guy or something like that, there with his family,
bless their hearts. That usually was the case where, it's just people who aren't used to either going to Disney or maybe are like a little bit older, a little more technologically challenged. So I would use my discretion in that position. And we were allowed to break immersion privately in those conversations, but you did have to do it privately because the atrium is like an echo chamber. So if you're talking to one passenger really loudly and you're like, yeah, if you want to go to Hollywood Studios, and the person who's dressed in full Mandalorian garb is like 2 feet over. You don't want to break their immersion. So
That's
it was, it was definitely a little tricky, but I love a good challenge. So
there's probably a lot of bathroom incidents too, because people couldn't find the bathroom because they're all named Fresher.
The refresher.
Yeah. So our guidance on that was, and with all terminology, is kind of like a gentle correction. So somebody be like, oh, where's the bathroom? And you start walking them over and you're like, oh, our refreshers are this way. So instead of being like, that's the refresher, you kind of just like substitute the word.
I'm sorry, I don't understand.
I'm not sure how most people pick up on it. Yeah, exactly. I don't understand what you're saying. That was usually the joke we would make. But
was it always was it a gratifying moment? Like, did you ever have anyone who came up to you and they didn't need to be corrected? Like you just, they just spoke like, okay, where's the calf machine? Or like, where's the refresher? Like, did you ever have that kind of situation with a guest where it's like they just kind of knew how to immerse themselves?
Did they ever out jargon the staff? The staff were confused.
Oh yeah, I can listen. As you can tell, hopefully with somebody who has the Star Wars job I have right now, I know what I'm talking about. But there are certainly people who could out-lore me, out-jargon me, and to a degree, I'm glad they could because technically in our role, we're like in Star Wars, so we're not supposed to know historically like everything,
right?
Which
that
was
makes sense.
So hard. And shout out to any passengers who heard me talk about Din Djarin because there's no way I should have known who he was. But would I talk about him anyway? If people let me, I would get there. But yeah, so basically one instance I guess I don't know if I can think of a specific example, but we had a lot of repeat passengers.
Okay.
Yeah, we could say like I was Molly from Raxus. I have my name tag. It says Molly from Raxus on it, and stuff like that.
Did you get to pick the planet you were from?
In terms of, I did, yeah. So, but I couldn't do like any planet. Part of our process of onboarding, they had you do like a little personality quiz, and it was supposed to help you pick out what planet you were going to be from. I ended up with Landscar. I wasn't a huge fan of like the description was not close. I was kind of going to like what's close to my actual hometown in the U.S. And Landscar was not that close. If I had to liken my hometown to a planet, it would honestly be like Cantonica to a certain extent, like Canto Bite, because there's horse racing. Anyway,
sure.
But that wasn't an option. And so I saw Raxus and I'm a Bad Batch. And I was like, you know what? Like, obviously there was Clone Wars arc on Raxus too, but I'm like, Raxus doesn't a Bad Batch. And then my really close friend who had actually been at my previous role with me, and we both were in the same transfer group, she was doing Raxus. So I was like, I think I got to be from Raxus. So that's really the story of how I ended up being Molly from Raxus.
That's awesome.
But it really grew to be a part. Yeah, you talk about it enough, it becomes a part. Like it feels like I really am from Raxus. Sometimes I still have my stories of like, oh yeah, I grew up, just on the outskirts of the city of Raxelon, and you start to believe it after a while.
I mean, it was 8 months of telling this backstory.
Yeah.
I'm curious, how deep are the characters' backstories you guys play? Did you get to make up kind of what you wanted, or were it all given like maybe a D&D style booklet of choices? So you got the planet.
Yeah, that's a good question. We were really given a lot of freedom. There weren't really any guidelines. Like the limiting the planets was really the biggest guideline. Everything else was doable. Honestly, most people struggled with coming up with backstories because a lot of my coworkers were not familiar with Star Wars, which is fine. Because like I said, in our position, it's really almost better to not know, because then you're not tempted to engage with passengers in a way where you're gonna, spoil something.
You don't know.
At this point, the Star Cruiser, the Star Cruiser takes place before the Rise of Skywalker. So you accidentally say anything from that movie, that's really bad.
You've already blown the timeline.
If you even reference, if you reference Star Wars as Star Wars, that is the worst thing you could probably do. But like in terms of crafting the rest of our backstory, it was really up to us. I had a whole elaborate backstory I made for myself before I started my onboarding process when I found out I got the job. And I was going to be from Sorgan, and I was going to like set myself up to be the secret daughter of like Din and O'Mara, who is the farmer girl in Sorgan. I'm like, I'm going to be the secret kid. Like I had this whole funny, elaborate backstory. And then I couldn't pick Sorgan. So, that kind of went away. Yeah, that went away really quickly, which is ironic because we do have we had a dish in our lunch buffet one of the days, and it was called Sorgan stew, and I was like, come on.
It's my family dish.
Yeah, I ended up exactly. I still had to get Mandalorian stuff in there somehow. So I made myself a Mandalorian historian because I'm like such a big Mandalorian fan. So I'm like, okay, really the key word here is just like history instead of talking about like, Mandalorian content, Mandalorian history, because it's actually part of our galaxy. Like it actually happened. So I was like a Mandalorian historian from Raxus, and I had just been waving in transports to Chandrila Starline because I came from parking at Epcot was my old role before the Star Cruiser.
Nice.
So I kind of like, I would blend the two.
That's
so really
awesome.
that was the biggest guideline on backstories for all of us was try to base it off your real life as much as you can, but translate it into Star Wars.
Right. I guess that makes it easy to remember and makes it consistent, I guess.
Yeah, it's a little bit easier than trying to explain to people, I'm the secret child of these two characters that, by the way, never got together in canon.
Right.
Yeah.
Probably another benefit with it not being a bunch of super fans is you don't end up with all the staff being Jedi in hiding.
Yeah, like not everyone's like the secret son of Luke Skywalker,
Exactly.
Exactly. Yeah, or not everybody's force sensitive, or like has some kind of traumatized backstory related to Order 66 through generations. Yeah.
Right.
I'm sure we threw around jokes about stuff like that. Like I think I had a coworker, shout out Charles from Baraka, and he is a redhead like Cal Kestis, and he used to make the joke that like some kind of joke that he was related to Cal Kestis or like
Kestis
new Cal
Jr.
Kestis or something. But yeah, exactly. But yeah, that used to be so fun. And then he came up with a story too that he like was from he was born on Baraka, but then he like was raised on Kashyyyk with Wookiees, so he used to like consider himself a Wookiee. And yeah, we would do fun stuff like that, but nothing like my great uncle was Luke Skywalker. That was definitely like a no.
Just get really fan fiction-y.
Yeah. So
exactly.
For the fans who love lore, the Halcyon Legacy, and we've thrown the name of the ship around a bit. It's a Chandrila Starline Purgle class Star Cruiser, and I love how they add in the Purgle class. Of course, now more people are probably aware of the Purgles at this point, since it's graduated from animation over to the live action series. But I'm just curious, like with this whole sort of initiative by Walt Disney World and everything, similar to what they did with Galaxy's Edge when that launched, there was a variety of sort of multimedia going on as far as trying to integrate the location into like Star Wars stories. And there was a comic book run called The Halcyon Legacy by Marvel Comics. And there was a couple of novels which the ship was featured in, Princess and the Scoundrel by Del Rey, and a variety of the High Republic stories as well. So it's really cool to see this like whole thing being like sort of cemented in the canon and all that stuff. But I'm just sort of curious, like, did you read the comic? Did you have to do any homework, prior, like, other than your character building? Like, did you end up reading any of those stories?
Oh Oh yeah. As soon as I got the job, I was interested, but I kind of like held back. I was like, okay, let me just get there and see. Nothing was required, so I'll kind of answer that part of the question first. Like, this is all just kind of like a do whatever you want kind of thing. I realized quickly I wanted to read the Halcyon Legacy comics when I was doing training. Our training was very elaborate. This could be a whole other conversation, but I'll say it very quickly. For my role, we essentially completed about 6 or 7 different lines of business. So my training was 10 weeks long, in all those different lines of business. So one of them is recreation to, like learn how to facilitate a bunch of the activities on the ship. And one of those is giving a ship orientation of fun facts all around the ship. And a dozen of those or so are all from they're in the Halcyon Legacy comics. So whoever was training me was like, that's a great resource if you want to, practice your ship orientation. I'm like, oh man, I guess I got to get the Halcyon Legacy comic and, read all about it so that I can throw in some fun facts in my ship orientation. And so I ordered myself like the anthology copy of all the Halcyon Legacy comics and like read them all one night. And that was really cool because, like the lightsaber markings from Anakin and Asajj Ventress's like duel are in the Halcyon. Like they're on the staircase and they're like filled in with gold. They're actually there. And I used to point it out on every ship orientation. Of course, I would never say the names of who made them. I'd just say like a Jedi and a Sith because I didn't know. And then the lightsaber training pod, I'd be like, oh, this was actually a gift to us from 2 Jedi, or we made this to honor 2 Jedi who saved our ship from, raiders because, Nibasik and Buriaga. And I was like, I think one of the Jedi was a Wookiee. So I would throw in stuff from those. So I definitely personally did my homework. And and then when it comes to The Princess and the Scoundrel, that's actually a really fascinating story is that book, the copy of the book I have was a gift to us from the Star Cruiser for the 1-year anniversary on March 1st.
Oh, wow.
Which I call the best day of my life. And I can go into more detail about that later. But we, depending on who got there, because we had like a little, party that we were still working that day, but I had that day off because I requested it off because it was the Mandalorian season 3 premiere. And I went to the ship for the party and the gift was the book. And it came with like a little note from Beth Rivas, the author, and kind of like talking to us about, being important to the writing of the book, just like how she hoped that we did it tribute and things like that, which is super neat. But in the book, there's Han scratching in his initials, his and Leia's initials in the engineering room. And those were also in our engineering room in Arabesh. So that was really cool. And then I ended up,
awesome.
I ended up getting another Halcyon Legacy anthology copy from the Halcyon too. So I have 2 copies of the anthology now, one from the Halcyon, one that I bought before then. So
that's awesome.
Kind of funny.
So
But
the one,
I definitely did my homework, but it wasn't required.
yeah, the ones on the Halcyon, do they have like a limited edition cover? You can only buy that one aboard the ship?
Or staff only, maybe?
I don't, not from my memory. So I know that the ones that we got as crew members, it is the exact same as the one I bought. Like it was the anthology, so it's like it's all the same. Like they literally look the same, except I had some crew members sign like the inside of one. But we had comics on the ship that we would occasionally, some passengers would receive if something went wrong with their voyage, or we just wanted to give them a special little gift. The stuff that Disney does, we do it at all the resorts. And I don't know if those were like technically limited edition. I think they was just like they were the individual stories, though. They weren't anthologies. Like they weren't the whole I think it's 4 or 5, maybe even 6 issues. It would just be like the Lando and Hondo issue or the Padme and Anakin one. So I don't know if they were exclusive covers. They might have been. Unfortunately, I didn't know enough about comics at the time. I'm a little more well versed now because I've been buying some Mandalorian adaptation comics, so I got some more experience. But we had some on the ship, but the ones that we got were like the ones with all the issues in it, and it was just a part of, I don't even know what the occasion was, but I was very grateful for it.
Yeah, no, that's cool. I thought it's very similar to when Galaxy's Edge opened. They did a Marvel Comics run for Galaxy's Edge, also a very like short run, 5 issues long or so, maybe it wasn't 4, but they did short stories kind of based in Black Spire Outpost, and they had their own creation, their own character, Vi Moradi, who is like resistance spy who shows up in the stories, and pops up in the parks. And I love how they did the same thing with Halcyon Legacy. The captain of the ship, Captain Kevin, and director Lenka Mock, and the D309, is it the droid?
Yeah.
And the First Order
D3.
Lieutenant Croy, who ends up being like the villain of the story. So I got two questions for you. The D3 droid, because everyone who walks into their room, they get like an AI style sort of droid, sort of communications panel on the wall where you can ask it questions and it answers. Like, how does that work? And then also, completely separate question. The First Order Lieutenant Croy from the comic book, he, towards the end of the story, he says, I've got to investigate the Halcyon Legacy, because, he gets the idea like, oh, they're harboring resistance people aboard the ship. Is that supposed to be a direct tie-in to why he shows up in the experience when he does?
Yeah, so let me answer the first one first. So D3, D309, but we always call it D3 for short, because of course it's much easier. So you're talking to the right person, because I helped facilitate some of the crew training on that at a certain point. But essentially, D3 is, like an AI. I think it's like Disney's first AI character, I think. I don't know. I think she holds that title, but don't quote me on it. And passengers can interact with that panel, and D3 will start the initial interaction just trying to get to know the family, and she can make special offerings. She doesn't, but the thing that a lot of people never really understood, because, it's hard to make it clear when we're not standing there with the passengers the entire time, like, interact with her this way. Is that she can't always, if you ask her to do something, she's not always going to do it because she's AI, Right. So she would sometimes offer, various stories based on the experience, and everything is powered through the magic bands, or the M bands is what we call them, because we didn't want to call them magic bands on the ship. And the M bands have a lot of information about the passengers in terms of what they're doing on their phone or their data pad, which is facilitated through that whole Play Disney app. It's the people who worked on this are phenomenal. So if any way they happen to be listening, shout out to all of you. You're incredible. I can't imagine what went behind all of it. But D3 could at times recognize how that journey's going. And so, like, if people were First Order aligned, she might not be as willing to share any resistance intel. And if, you're resistance leaning, then of course it is what it is. But you could, like, there were some situations passenger could get in where, like, they help her negotiate with a pirate to, like, let us go through the Adnax Nebula at night. She would tell bedtime stories sometimes if you ask for one, about like R2-D2 being the hero of all the Star Wars movies, which is so funny. Just cool little stuff like that. So she was just there to, like, really the people I worked with really want us to emphasize is that she was there to enhance the experience. So she wasn't like a concierge droid. She couldn't, like, turn off lights or get help put in a request at the desk to get towels. She was just, like, there to kind of be an extra character, but, like, personally in your room. So
Gotcha.
She really was just like another character, and they were just playing around with the AI medium. She was cool, but it was hard to, like, get the most out of it sometimes for passengers, just because it's hard to communicate that to them, to be like, oh, it's an AI droid.
Yeah, they got to figure it out for themselves.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. And then as far as Croy in the comics, yes, that is supposed to tie right in, because when your Halcyon journey starts, like, I think it's a few days before you board on your app, you get a message from Shangri-La Starline. They're like, just so you know, the First Order is investigating Shangri-La Starline, but it shouldn't impact our 275th anniversary voyage. It'll be fine. And then, you get on the ship and you start the captain's toast or muster, and you quickly find out not everything's fine, and Croy arrives with some stormtroopers. So that ties directly into the beginning of our story. He thinks that we got resistance activity going on the ship, so let him be the judge of it.
Gotcha. So this whole experience, it takes place between episodes 8 and 9, and with the overall kind of, like, I'm assuming it's a repeat sort of overarching story through the whole experience, but they really emphasize the various storylines that the guests can experience, like, throughout the whole weekend. So can you sort of elaborate on sort of what that was like as a guest, the various storylines being like taking place through the activities, or like, what is it that, like, how did that look like?
Yeah, so the fun thing about the storylines is that you could kind of be a part of multiple at the same time. So it was really fun, because obviously on the crew member side, I pretty plainly could see, like, who was doing what, because I could see I'm checking people in for our events. So if you're coming to a Resistance event, I know you're Resistance, and if you're going to the First Order event, well, like, I know that you're trying to take over the ship. But there's the Resistance path, which is, there's a bunch of different ones that could branch off of that, but there's one where you're really helping Cruise Director Lenka Mock, and you really want to work with her. She's like probably one of the strongest Resistance allies, if not the strongest, that you could bond with on the ship. And that goes hand in hand with her droid SK620, who's like what people probably think is like the R2 looking droid is SK. And then there's like Resistance Scoundrel, which is Wraith Cole. So he's like, think like the Han Solo character, I guess is the best way I could describe him. But him with Gaia, who of course is the Twi'lek entertainer. She is the best entertainer in the galaxy. She is our intergalactic queen, and they were kind of hand in hand because Wraith is Gaia's manager. So that was kind of like your scoundrelly path, but Wraith had a thing for Lenka, so he was willing to help the Resistance. And then of course First Order, pretty self-explanatory. If you're helping Croy, if you're helping the Stormtroopers, and that's the path you're going down. But you could technically be First Order and Resistance, which if you're trying to be a double agent, you could make it happen, but it was hard because nobody would trust you. And then there's the Force path, of course. So we have the Saja, who aren't really like Jedi. I think that confuses a lot of people who didn't get to go, which is totally understandable. But the Saja are like teachers of lightsaber training, but they were supposed to be like more elusive to the Force. Like they weren't really sure they could ever like wield it. But they were the ones who, if you like wanted to be a Jedi, you would really hang around the Saja. But yeah, you could really like experience. It would be hard to experience all of the various things you could do because there's so many different combinations. Like yes, those are 4 very like distinctive things like Resistance, Scoundrel, First Order, Jedi, but nothing was really ever set in stone, and nobody ever really like fully committed to one path. I mean, maybe they did, but most people would accidentally, at least have an interaction with some people who are in another allegiance, and they would be slightly that way too. So I know when I did my voyage with my family, I wanted to be mostly with Wraith Cole because that just seemed like the most fun. But I was Wraith Cole and Resistance, like I was both of those hardcore. And some people would do First Order and Scoundrel. Some people would do First Order and, like I said, First Order, Resistance, be double agents. And of course, the Jedi path too was also very usually Resistance aligned. But yeah, those are all kind of like the different paths. Definitely easy to intertwine, but it was the pull of, that's why so many people came so many different times. Like they wanted to do it again and again so they could experience all the different storylines, because there are like these story moments that just happen throughout the voyage, and you never know when they're going to happen unless you like commit so hard to certain paths. It's very interesting.
Interesting. You've alluded to being a guest aboard the ship with your family then. So what was your favorite narrative aboard the experience, like when you were a guest?
Yeah, I have to say, being a part of what's called the Hyananea heist, or it's like Wraith Cole pulls off this heist where there's this really precious stone called the Hyananea and the hyperspace compass, which is this artifact in the atrium. And so you're helping him like steal that back because it's a very precious artifact for the people of Ryloth, the Twi'leks. And so you're helping Gaia to get this back to her people. It's been gone for hundreds of years. And that was really fun because, of course, I had a little bias because the person who's friends with Wraith on this voyage clearly knows who I am, because I voyaged when I was like, after I'd been working there for 5 months, maybe 6. So they definitely knew me and we had a relationship, but they don't play favorites still. They treat everybody equally, but he knew I really wanted to do it. So we were down in the cargo hold, just like small corner across from like the dining room. It's a very dimly lit space, and he has like me and my family, who was also like deemed trustworthy, and then like only a handful of other people. And he's using Sabak cars to hand us all out very specific roles we had to play to pull off this heist. It was just so much fun, and there's so much stuff that happens right there that even as a crew member who'd been working there for 6 months, I never knew that like those characters exchanged those lines at that time, but yet it happens every voyage. Like it's just crazy to think about. But yeah, I'd say definitely like that whole Hyananea heist it is. Oh, absolutely. I saw a live play studying abroad in London, 5 years ago now, and that it very much feels like that same thing. I saw it was The Great Gatsby, and I experienced that, and the actors didn't even have microphones. Of course, the actors of the Starcruiser did need microphones because when they were in the atrium, they need to be heard sometimes. But yeah, it was basically like a live action play, but you're in it. You're in the play. You just don't know what your lines are. So, but there was never any pressure to know what your lines are. You just kind of went as you went. But yeah, that's essentially what it felt like.
So being a live play, of course, like, and you talk about the atrium, like that's where I guess everyone gathers, and it's sort of like a central area for a lot of, just kind of interaction with the characters on board and stuff like that. A lot of us have seen sort of the promotional videos and stuff with Rey fighting Kylo Ren aboard the Halcyon Legacy and the story. Yeah. I'm assuming that has a place somewhere. Have you seen this? And the patent is out there, right? So like, hopefully this isn't, completely breaking the magic for people, but have you seen the extendable lightsaber up close? Like what is this? I've only seen it over the camera. So like, what does this thing actually look like?
Yeah, I think that maybe one of the only props I've never seen up close. Of course, I've been close enough, like I know. I'm standing like, but I'm standing where other passengers can stand. So I'm really not seeing anything great. They are smart in that respect to keep, people like me, just in case we get too curious. No, prop masters are delightful. Everybody who worked there is just, I miss them all so much. They're so amazing. But no, I never saw that one up close, unfortunately. But, of course, I know how they, make it work for the rest of the fight. The people, the actors who are also doing their own stunts in that scene, all incredible people. Love all of them so much. All of our Reys and Kylos are just so cool. But yeah, they slayed that scene, but I never got to see that technology up close, unfortunately. I hate to tell you.
Gotcha. It's very cool. I mean, anytime I see the videos for any of that stuff, like,
I've been sitting here just crossing my fingers that one day Disney will start to sell it as a prop.
Yeah. Well, because we've got a friend who sells lightsabers, and we love lightsabers over here. So I got to just ask, what is your favorite lightsaber? Like, is there a favorite hilt, favorite character hilt that you like? Just that's the one.
I mean, unless you guys tell me it doesn't count the dark saber. I mean, I love Mandalorians. I bought Disney's dark saber hilt while I was in Disney. Bought it for myself for Christmas. That was maybe not the wisest choice for me, just financial wise. Being in the college program at Disney, I'm like, oh gosh, now I'm out like. And of course, then they started selling the darksaber for like 30% off, like 2 months later, and I was like, "You have to be joking!" No. But I do love the darksaber. I wish Din got to be able to like wield it well at least once, but that's okay. Yeah. But we also sold our own lightsaber hilt on the Halcyon. I never ended up buying it, but because it wasn't really anything like super elaborate design wise, but it did have the Chandrila Starline logo, like those 2 lines with the circle and the dot. It had that on the bottom, and it had you had Arabesh letters that you could like magnetically stick on it, and it was pretty cool. I had to sell that, a lot. Merchandise was part of my job too. You'll find I literally was anywhere on the ship at any given point in my role. So I was in the store sometimes selling stuff, and I'd be like, "Look at this lightsaber hilt! It's great. You can put different Arabesh letters on it." But I would say, definitely my favorite lightsaber.
Public credits to no good out
is
here.
The darksaber.
Did you ever joke around with somebody like that when they presented their credit card and they'd be like, "Republic credits are no good out here"?
I'll tell you the most incredible interaction I had in terms of credits at that store was somebody with a replica Beskar ingot that was so heavy. It was the most insane replica I've seen. Wow. I'm talking about, I'm probably rambling about Mandalorian history as I always do in and out of the ship. And they're like, well, what I happen to have. And they just pulled this Beskar ingot out of their pocket. I was like, what? Had the Imperial insignia on it and everything. It literally looked like it came off the set of the Mandalorian. It was crazy.
I
was like, well, unfortunately, I don't think we can take Beskar payment yet.
Just walking around.
Yeah, it was
block.
That's dedication.
No, literally. And I was like, I got my eye twitching. I'm like, I would love to take this from you, but you can keep that. And I'm like, man, this would be so cool to have. And people did give us a lot of gifts. I have an entire black tote bag I haven't even sorted through yet, full of random sweet gifts that people would just give us on voyages, especially near the closure. People were always trying to give us stuff, which was super sweet. Wow. But unfortunately, that Beskar ingot was never one of them. But yeah, that person, shout out, because that was insane. I was losing it, I'm sure. Internally at that moment, I probably had to go, back somewhere hidden and just scream. They used to happen a lot.
Yeah.
I just want to scream on the spot in a good way.
Sounds like you need to join the Mandalorian Mercs.
Yeah. Do you have a costume?
Oh yeah. No, I see that's my struggle. I would love that. I'm just not crafty enough to like put a suit together. I need help. But one of my for lack of a better term, managers, because there's a lot of like Disney hierarchy lingo. I'm not gonna, make you guys memorize what all that is. But one of my managers for my food and beverage part of my job there, he does a lot of cosplay work. He used to be like my work dad. A bunch of us would call him like dad at work. So shout out Jacob. Love you, miss you. He was an still is avid cosplayer, and he made me like a 3D printed of Din's pauldron with the Mudhorn on it because he knew I was going on a voyage. So I did end up wearing that on my Batu day. I had to take it off at a certain point because it was very clunky because I didn't have any other pieces of armor. So for me, I'm like, walking around and it's clunking around, and I got like a tiny shoulder. But I mean, it would be a dream one day to have, a full Mando Merc suit, but I just got to get craftier, or, I got to make a friend who's willing to craft it all for me. Yeah.
I think those groups are pretty good, at least everyone I've talked to. So I'm sure there's a local regiment, they'll happily take you in and show you the ropes and give you tips and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah. Absolutely. I just gotta lock in, at this point I might as well, here I am, I'm writing Star Wars stuff. So might as well, there's no better time than now.
Yeah. We had a guest on a while ago. Her name was Jess. She was part of the Boba Fett fan club, and I don't know if she's.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I don't know. If you love Mandalorians, she's actually in our Discord still, and I'm sure she'd be happy to chat with you at some point. I don't know. Maybe she knows some people, but
I'm sure she'd say yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
How has your time working at the Walt Disney World experience just impacted your love of the more recent Star Wars stories? Because I think we all sort of grew up in that time of the prequels. My favorite Star Wars movie is Revenge of the Sith, and the Clone Wars came out right when I hit high school, and it was sort of like the perfect age, for this show that was sort of a bit more gritty, PG rated animated Star Wars shows, just like
we're talking Cartoon Network,
the best. Oh my god,
no Treehouse TV.
Yeah,
no more Treehouse TV. So so growing up having your favorite Star Wars movies sort of cemented in this particular era, having to be sort of immersed on a day-to-day experience, right? Like in this sort of new trilogy of films with these new stories and stuff. I guess what was that like for you as a Star Wars fan, having sort of to be that every day?
Yeah, so it definitely, not that I had like a negative outlook, but the general kind of feeling that most people have towards the newer movies is for me personally, I enjoyed them, but they weren't, my favorite.
Right.
I just, thought there could be some improvements, but it's not, they're still fun to watch for me. But getting to work in this experience definitely made me appreciate them more, I would say. Getting to, work with the characters. So really the only sequel trilogy, established characters we worked with were, Chewbacca, Rey, Kylo. I mean, I never really talked to Kylo Ren, but, maybe I would speak Kylo Ren, don't want to speak too much to that. But those were really the only three established characters of the sequel trilogy I would see. But even then, it gave me a deeper appreciation for them and their role in the movies. And then being on Batu, because even though we're on the Star Cruiser, our passengers would be going to Batu on their second day, and we had to help facilitate them getting on and off the ship and things like that. And so I was on Batu quite a bit working. Of course, I would go as the day gets, right after work too sometimes. But when I was there working, I would be seeing the stormtroopers roaming and seeing Kylo, and of course I never saw Rey because we were in the First Order part of the outpost the entire time, so it was really just Kylo and the First Order lieutenant too, who peruses the outpost, Lieutenant Agnon. So I would see the interchanging of various faces for that, and that it just being a part of the immersion really makes you feel like you're there, kind of like I said earlier. So I really felt like I was a part of those stories, and that definitely does help your outlook. And it's cool to know that you were a part of the story that I'm technically semi-canon because I had to be canon because everything that's there has to be canon technically.
It's only a matter of time
knowing that you're kind of canon in that part. Yeah, exactly. I could be, the next person running with a Camtono through Cloud City. Shout out Woodrow.
If they make a Lego Halcyon Legacy, are you gonna be a Molly minifigure?
Yeah, never. I mean, when they released the Star Wars like a movie that was on the Halcyon, the summer vacation, there's it's really funny because it's definitely a pure coincidence because that movie came out I think like in the summer 2022.
Yeah.
And one of the Legos in the background that is a Chandrila Starline worker looks just like one of my coworkers there, like red hair, not Charles. This is a different redhead. Like red hair, like it's just like crazy. Like they look the same. And so we always
Sounds
used
like
to joke.
canon
We're
to
like,
me.
that's Eli. That's Eli. Yeah, exactly. So we make jokes about being canon, but yeah, I definitely have a much bigger appreciation for that era, and it's the only time Rey and Kylo Ren see each other between Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker canonically. So the fact I got to see that fight happen, like, gosh, I don't know how many times now, but I'll tell you what, I never got sick of it. Yeah, it's the only time they meet in canon between those two movies, and I used to get to see it like just on a Tuesday night, clocking into work.
That's amazing. Yeah, I'm gonna need to look up some of that selfie stick footage and.
Oh, absolutely! Listen, my dad got a whole vlog when we were on our voyage, so I'll link you to it. He got a great shot of that whole scene.
Perfect. So, do you think that the designated era of the storytelling was, and Blake and I have speculated about this, do you think this was maybe a bit of a disconnect for potential guests who would have otherwise attended if it was based in their era of choice? Because I think we all grew up in a time in which the prequels were very divisive films at the time. And, I remember, like yourself, joking about, hiding your Jar Jar love, like it was kind of the same for me. And like I would always get flack. It's like if someone found out, like I loved the prequels, it was like, dang, like, what are you doing? Like, as if I was committing a crime.
Yeah.
And, I just think like there's still fans out there though, that, they're super hardcore to the bone for the original trilogy. And, they might not be willing to put out for, the premium experience that this is. And if it's not based in their era of choice, like, what are your theories on that? If I might ask. Yeah.
So, of course, like, and everything I say is always just my opinion. Like, this isn't anything I ever get filtered from Disney, but I do think definitely in some cases it played a factor in some ways. If you were there and you were doing the experience, you didn't really care that it was the sequel trilogy. From my opinion, I never really remember seeing any passengers who were like, Rey, Mary Sue, which I can't even get started on elaborating that. Let's not unpack all of that. But I never saw anything like that, or people openly disrespecting them. Of course, some people just don't know boundaries in general when it comes to entertainment across the board, but that's a different issue. But I even just talking amongst my coworkers, we're like, they like if we were able to do different eras, maybe we would get, more people would want to spend the money to come, stuff like that. Just like kind of we would just throw the ideas around ourselves. It was very interesting though, because because
that's exactly what Josh and I were kind of
you go ahead.
Because like if it was like in theory just like rolling eras, so like I don't know, like a couple months of this era, a couple months of that era, or even like week to week,
like in the park too.
Over like Batuu, just swapping out costumes and like, leaving everything else the same. I do wonder if that would have drawn a lot more attention to people who were really only one era.
And I feel like that's the ideal scenario. Like I always wonder if that's something they like are trying to make work, but I can understand why at the same time it wouldn't, because there's just so many logistics, and like you mentioned, all the tie-ins, like there's so much history they've already built around it, and they have Vimaratis, like what would they do with all of that, if everything looks the same, back in the days of the before the fall of the Jedi as it does when the First Order comes around, like that's tricky to talk around. But I guess since like Batu's a backwater planet, they might that's true. But at the same time, they're already kind of bending their rules, and this was especially, I did not mind, because you'll find out. The biggest reason, like I really wanted to go to Disneyland when I worked at Disney World, because Disneyland had Din and Grogu. They got them in like November or something, 2022, and Disney World did not have them. So I don't know if you knew that, but Disney World did not have Din and Grogu when Disneyland got them in their Galaxy's Edge. And so like they had Boba Fett, they had Fennec Shand, they had Din Djarin, they had all these characters. And Disney World only had the sequel trilogy characters. And I was like, man, I really want to meet Din. Like I'm gonna go all the way to California just to meet him. And then surprise, March 1st, the day of this season 3 premiere day, Din and Grogu just walk out of Disney World. And I had no idea, even as somebody who was working at the Star Cruiser, I had no idea that they were coming. Nobody knew really. So I got to witness their like second set ever when they walked out, which was cool because I happened to be walking to the park the first time they ever came out. So hence why earlier I called that the best day of my life. That, you know, there's a lot going on for me that day. But that for us was a huge challenge because how do we talk around Din Djarin and Grogu walking around in, 35 ABY? Because people would see them. Yeah, they'd see them on their Batu day and come back be like, I just saw Grogu. And I'm like, who's that? That's really all you could do was play dumb, which broke my heart as the Mandalorian fan I am. I'm like, what do you mean I have to ask you who Din Djarin is? This is so humbling. I know everything there is to know about him. But yeah, it definitely like it's interesting to see them kind of pushing those boundaries. They recognize that they need these characters there, these newer characters, and they should be bringing more of the older characters back. So I mean, Disney World personally has an out on it because they have Star Wars Launch Bay, which is where I know like they're starting to make a little bit better use of that space. Like with Ashley Eckstein for Ahsoka Tano Day is going to be doing a meet and greet there soon. Oh, cool. And they had like a whole theater in there, and I think they used to do a show for like the sequel trilogy era, but then like when COVID happened, things got changed and they never really brought it back. But there you can meet like Chewbacca, Vader, and BB-8. At least at the time when I was working there, that's what those 3 characters were. So I feel like they could use that space a little bit more and get like like Anakin Skywalker. I know they have the costuming for it because he was at like a late night event either at Disney World or Disneyland. Like they have like these resources. So I don't know.
Yeah, so it's just a matter of.
But I do think personally, I was almost. I know that idea was getting thrown around a lot too when we closed. Was people being like, "Oh, are they going to remake it to like Mandalorian era to make it more popular?" I honestly don't know. Nobody knew. I don't know to this day.
It's so tough because
I got no idea.
They have these ships out, on all the time. These giant, like Kylo Ren's big ship and stuff. So it would be a challenge to change the era and have to maybe remove that. But if they're bending the rules, like letting Boba Fett and Mando and Grogu just walk out and Fennec Shand, it's just like it kind of begs the question, like, okay, it's really just a matter of like where they're willing to bend the rules, and I think like with the characters, it might be more of like a standpoint of promoting their new content on Disney Plus rather than this is what the fans want. And, personally, I would love it if they did like 6-month seasons. It's like, hey, now we're doing like Empire Rebellion season. I don't care if the Kylo Ren ship's still there, like,
true.
Or
they just swap out.
I would, like it's weird for me to like talk about Galaxy's Edge to people who don't know what it is, and then tell them this is a place that's basically like Star Wars Land where you can't see Darth Vader and stormtroopers. It's the most surreal conversation because as I talk about it, I'm like, wait a minute, like what? And when I've gone to Universal Studios, like, sorry, this is a whole tangent. Like when I've gone to Universal Studios, like I've thoroughly enjoyed the Wizarding World Harry Potter experience there. And it's sort of vague as to the canonicity of the events that transpire at the park. I don't really think it is. I mean, the rides have their own storyline going on, but it's sort of like it's like a fan service ride rather than like this is a story ride. Yeah. And I gotta be honest, like I think I kind of prefer that. And I'm a Star Wars fan to the bone, but it sort of just allows me to unlock my own imagination and there's no restrictions on like the park. Everyone in the park is sort of, even though it's not as cemented in a particular era because, of course there's a giant dragon on the top of Gringotts and, everything else is sort of coexisting in the same time period. But just as like a personal preference, like, is that what you would prefer? Because I know that's what I would prefer out of Galaxy's Edge or out of a Disney experience that involves a Star Wars, story. But is that what you would prefer as well in an ideal world? You get to go to Disneyland and have those photo opportunities with Darth Vader and then Darth Maul and then Boba Fett and all these different things at the same time? Or do you prefer the in-canon kind of cemented storylines?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, I think I have to take it from various perspectives. So I think from your perspective too, as somebody who's just a fan of Star Wars, who grew up with the prequel trilogy, who wants to just go to Star Wars land and see Darth Vader and his stormtroopers, and maybe Luke Skywalker comes around the corner. Heck yeah, sign me up. I want, I don't care if, like you said, Kylo Ren's, TIE fighter is behind him. I don't care. Just give me Luke Skywalker. I think it'd be really cool if they could find a way to really do that. At the same time, it's like, it is cool to have the history of Batuu if you know it. That's the only thing. That's the catch, is you have to know it to appreciate it fully. And see Vi Moradi and stuff. But I think that the only problem with Galaxy's Edge in that respect is that they did create this beautiful backstory and all these interconnected stories, and they bring Vi Moradi in, which is super cool. And but the day guests, are not gonna recognize Vi Moradi. I think a lot of people see her and they're like, "Who is that? What movie is she from?"
Right.
She's not. She's not. You're like. Most people are not asking for pictures of Vi Moradi, or they're asking for a picture thinking it's someone that's in a movie or a show, and then they go home, they're like, I don't know who this is. But that's no disrespect to Vi Moradi, my queen, and everybody who has ever been quote unquote friends with her. You guys are amazing, but it's just the nature of it. But I also do know people who have helped to create the story of Galaxy's Edge, because just with the nature of working at the Starcruiser, a lot of similar people, and they're amazing storytellers with huge just visions and imagination, and the kindest people we ever talked to, and brilliant, and the stuff that advice they used to give us at the Starcruiser is just so cool. But it's tricky. Yeah. They really wanted to go all in and creating this one specific world that's unique, that you have to go there to understand, kind of thing. But at the same time, it's hard for those fans who just want to see the people they love, the people they grew up with. So for me, it's not like a yes or no. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You can't do both. So I feel like, in a way, I almost wish it was the only way it could really work is if they did certain hours almost. So it's it's during the day we have the Batuu people, the people who are here for the story. Once sun goes down, bring out Vader. But at the same time, you can't bring out Vader at night because he's not going to be able to see where he's going. So yeah, that's a whole other problem for those poor actors. But yeah, it's just I really, it's hard to envision a way they can make it work, but I wish we could have both at the same time.
That's the other side of it too.
Yeah.
Do you remember?
Yeah, exactly. That's why Star Wars launch bay should get more attention, because that's a perfect spot for it. Anyway, sorry, continue.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, because do you remember when they did other Star Wars style events before Galaxy's Edge? I don't know how often you went to Disney as a kid, but I recall there is some pretty redonkulous footage of those Star Wars dances that they used to do.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, Boba Fett. I just put a Boba Fett one in my head right now. Yeah. They had there was various things they would do. They had Star Wars weekends at Hollywood Studios, and I think that those videos were a part of Star Wars weekends. And they had I don't know the official name, but it's a Jedi training, and it was a stage outside of Star Tours.
Yeah,
and so you could get chosen to get trained with a lightsaber.
Some little
they had
kid was just whacking Darth Vader it was no tomorrow.
Exactly.
You couldn't even see the kid.
Yeah, and then
too short.
Yeah, they had I remember my first time ever going to Disney, I was on the cusp of turning 3. There's no way I should remember this, but deep in the recesses of my brain, I remember seeing the Hollywood Studios parade that had the cavalcade that had Luke and Leia in a Luke's land speeder, and R2 and Vader. They did used to have that kind of stuff, but I know ever since Galaxy's Edge opened, you only see Star Wars either in Galaxy's Edge, or if you go to Launch Bay and meet the specific characters. So it's sad to see that they had to peel it back, and I feel in a way that I guess they could avoid it by having those characters still be meetable outside of Galaxy's Edge, in the rest of Hollywood Studios, just like they used to do. At the same time, I can see why that's tricky too, because people are going to get confused. They're why are there Star Wars characters not in the Star Wars land?
Right.
It's hard. It's it's really hard. I do wonder how long they're going to keep it in this era, because the sequel era is already
it's all released,
getting old.
Right? Yeah.
not like old, but yeah,
Well,
it's almost been 10 years since
I was just gonna
the
say.
Force Awakens.
It's
You know,
almost
like
10 years, which is crazy.
yeah.
Yeah. Oh, go for it, Molly.
Yeah, no problem. It's crazy thing too because Galaxy's Edge didn't even open for. I think Disneyland was a few months before Disney World. I could be wrong, but I think Disneyland was a few months before us, and it was 2019. That's the year The Mandalorian came out.
Right.
Like that's the year The Rise of
yeah.
Skywalker came out. Like they didn't even open it until then. And really cool story from one of my coworkers who opened Galaxy's Edge at Disney World is they in Doc Ondar's Den of Antiquities, which is like a little shop with where you can buy all the lightsabers and stuff. Has Din's helmet and pulse rifle on the wall, and nobody knew what it was. They were like, "What?" They were like, "Oh, what is this Mandalorian helmet?" And like, "Oh, that must be from the holiday special." And then the Mandalorian premieres, and they're like, "Oh my god!" Yeah, so it's just I don't know when they're gonna pivot because the sequel trilogy really is starting to feel like it's already passing its era, but at the same time, Galaxy's Edge, especially with the pandemic, has only really been going for a few years. So I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a great point. So.
Yeah, I wonder how long they'll let certain exhibits stay there, right? Like Kylo Ren's shuttle before they replace it with something else. I mean, we've got 4 new Star Wars movies on the way, right? I mean, how are they? I'm curious to see how they're going to use the park to sort of market those films, like the Dawn of the Jedi one. And,
yeah, because they're different eras now.
Yeah, they're all different eras. The only one that lines up with the park remotely is the Rey film that they're looking at doing. Which, with what happened with half of the other projects in the past, like who knows if any of these will see the light of day, of course, because got to take everything with a grain of salt nowadays, even if it is announced. But it's crazy. But, I got to ask, what in your opinion is the most successfully immersive part of the ship, of the whole experience? Also the least immersive part? Like maybe you could have a list of top 3. I mean, we were trying to come up with some just random things the other day about this, but like what would you say is like, your top 3 sort of least and most immersive?
Yeah, great question. I love that one. I'll start with the most immersive. So my favorite place on the entire Halcyon is the bridge, where you're seeing space through the transport, or not the transport, the viewport. Gosh, wow, I'm out of my element. It's been too long. And you're literally interacting with the bridge. You're on the systems panels, you're on the weapons, you're shooting at things outside the viewport, and you're on shields, you're defending the ship, and you're also controlling these loader droids that are picking things up. It's just like, it's so believable, the technology that goes into making it believable. It's not something I think I can really talk about, but I've seen it up close, and it's like amazing. I could spend days just like looking at this technology. Cool. But it's so real when you're in there, and then the story aspect of it really gets you tied up because you do your bridge training. So crew members like me, and the reason I love the bridge so much is I was a crew member who used to train other crew members how to do this activity, but we lead like a bridge training which teaches the passengers how to use all the consoles. And I loved doing that training, and I loved training people to do the training. I got to know the bridge really well. Definitely left in the bridge a few times because it was late at night, that training. We could only really play around in space when people were asleep. So you can imagine how late that was. But it's just the story that went into it is when the characters would come in at the end of the training, and it was always a different character based on what time your training was at, with a different story, a different thing they had to get accomplished. And you'd go through an asteroid field, and you're involved in the action, and it's just so immersive. From the screens to the characters, they know your name, they say your name, you jump into hyperspace. I've jumped into hyperspace. I can't even begin to count how many times I've jumped into hyperspace at this point. It's so cool. So the bridge, anything on the bridge training, bridge events, definitely like my top tier immersive. You really feel like you're on a ship doing stuff.
It's like Star
it's
Tours
so
all
cool.
the time.
Yeah.
Exactly, except without the motion sickness.
Right.
Well, that's only a good thing. Because I did watch.
Some people would like,
Sorry,
you go ahead.
Some people.
Mm-hmm. Some people would like convince themselves, like gaslight themselves into thinking that they were motion sick.
Oh, I see.
And I didn't have the heart to tell them. We are in a building. Like this is not.
This is a stationary vessel.
Starcruiser. I had a passenger once who insisted that they were motion sick, and I'm like, please, we're in a building.
Yeah, it's just a TV, people. Like, I guess it would
exactly.
be a bit similar to the ride, right? The Rise of the Resistance ride when you first get out of the shuttle and you're looking at the giant sort of starscape behind the hangar. Shield, right? I mean, I assume it's probably a similar
exactly
experience.
how it feels.
Right,
Yeah, I could understand people who were like claustrophobic because we had no windows to the outdoors, of course, because then it's just bright Orlando light coming in.
Right.
So it's all like screens everywhere you look. But we did have one room, which is the climate simulator, which, quote unquote, simulates the climate of Batu. So that's usually where I would tell people to go if they're like feeling claustrophobic. Like, I totally understand. And you could leave, like, to just go to the terminal or the front whenever you wanted. If you needed to go somewhere, if you just needed to get air, like people who needed smoke breaks, they would take the launch pod back down to the terminal and they could go back out the front.
I'm sorry, ma'am, you're not allowed to leave.
So
We're in
there are ways
space.
to get there. Yeah, exactly. It's funny because some people would ask, they're like, am I allowed to like go do this? I'm like, you can do whatever you want. Like, you're not stuck in space. But it would be funny, like, if people wanted to, needed to go and we're in the middle of hyperspace and I'm just like sending out a launch pod, people are like, you're gonna kill them. And I'm like, I'm sorry. There's nothing I can do.
That's what they want.
Yeah,
Customer.
I can only imagine like some like
Exactly.
young family or something with their kids like 5 years old and they've seen that episode of the Clone Wars when like someone gets ejected out of hyperspace like while they're in hyperspace back in a real space, or that episode of Rebels that happens, right? And then just like flipping out, being like, "Mom, don't, Mom!"
And it's going to be the kids getting into it the most too.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
oh, totally.
I'm surprised I never saw a kid like scream and cry when we're getting blasted over by an asteroid fire blaze. Like, that is very realistic. But thankfully that never happened. At least not on any bridge that I worked on. But I'm sure one of my coworkers might have had a story or two.
Have you ever seen anyone order the Kyber drink? This is a super talked about drink on the internet. Maybe you can explain what it is.
Josh,
A Kyber drink. I don't know. I didn't. Unfortunately, I didn't like work in the bar area a lot. That's like a separate, like our bartender is of course separate position, but I was in the bar sometimes.
Yeah.
It's confusing. So I don't know if I know about like the Kyber drink. I know of course like there's a drink that's very expensive. I don't remember what it's
That's
called.
what it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's one and it does it involve like smoke?
I think so. I think
Or
it's
no?
so it's
'Cause
in
there
that,
is one
it's in that canteen thing or whatever those things are called, and like the doors open
Yeah.
and it's like this dry ice kind of smoke like poofs out, and you got like
like a
4
tiki
cups
drink.
in there. Yeah. Like, I think this drink is like $1,200
Oh, does it have
or
like
something.
all the different straws?
Oh yeah, I mean
so
I've only
I-
seen
I
pictures
think-
of it. But
yeah. I think so I know the one that's really expensive. I think the reason it's so expensive because you get to keep it. Like you get to keep like the thing it's in. I think. I don't know. I don't remember anybody ever, at least when I was near the Sublight Lounge is where what the bar is called. Like I don't remember seeing it, but I know there's like a blowtorch in the prep area that I think was for an expensive drink. Might have been for that one.
Well,
Unfortunately, I don't know. I do know there was one drink called, I don't know if the drink was called Yukola Atima, but they would play Yukola Atima whenever somebody ordered it, and it like could serve multiple people at once. Like I think you're all like drinking out of these straws in a canister. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's that drink. But they would like, we had this song that could play, and it's like Yukola Atima, and it would just like play.
Oh, that's
was
like
like
that
a
tiki
Takadama
place we went to.
It was like a tiki bar.
Yeah, it's like a tiki bar.
Yeah.
Like in a tiki bar they normally have these big like punch bowl drinks.
Fish bowls.
Yeah, fish bowls. Yeah, and then everyone's got a straw, and they always play like a big song, when it comes out. It reminds me of that.
Yeah, that's like, the Star Wars equivalent is Yukola Atima, and it would play whenever people split that drink.
And was this a song that they wrote for the drink, or is this a reused
Yeah,
song?
I guess it has to be because I haven't heard it anywhere else in Star Wars. But Yukola Atima apparently means let's drink in Hattis. I don't know if that's something that's well known. I don't know if that was made up for us.
That.
But Yukola Atima means let's drink in Hattis, and I know that because one of the bigger recreation activities I used to do too is called Cantina Chronicles, and it was like the non-alcoholic version of the flight of drinks, of like specialty drinks, and I had to like make all the drinks and know all the stories. So one of the stories is like it comes from Takadana and from Maz's castle, and it's like used to help her make deals, and Yukola Atima was the toast they would make. So
it must be nice to know more Hattis than Pudu and Slimo. That's all I know.
Yeah, you know, I'm still more well versed in Mandoa, but which is slowly getting canon. But you know, I could just whip that out on the Star Cruiser. There's a greeting in we talk in Inzellan, not often because I don't really know many Inzellan phrases, so fortunately I can't provide that. But our founder was the Inzellan Shug Jabor, so we had some Inzellan phrases thrown around, like Tabuite was our biggest one, which means savor the moment. That was our toast, is Tabuite. But there's a way to say hello, and more passengers knew it than me. And every time they said it, it sounded like they were saying like soy kuigar, which like horrible. I butchered that pronunciation, but like there's also a Mandoa for that means hello. Like it sounded like the Mandoa way of saying hello. So I'd often be like, "Excuse me, what are you? Is that Mandoa?" And they're like, "No, that's in Zelen." And I'm like, "Yeah, I knew that. I work here." Founder Shug Jabor.
Have you turn around and go, Criff?
Yeah.
Yeah. I wanted to see Dank Varric so bad.
You Dank Varric, yeah. Have you read the Republic Commando series?
No, it's bad. It's on my to be read list.
There is a lot. There's
long.
a lot of Mando terms in there.
It's all Mando. You definitely should.
Yep, that's where I've learned them all from. Funny enough, I go on Mandoa.org and that's where I read up on my vocab there. But I know it comes from these books, so it's really bad. I really need to be reading these books, but I keep accidentally like getting, the new book comes out and I'm like, I really got to read the High Republic book. And,
oh man,
I'm a very distracted
if you're doing that.
Yeah, we were literally just having this conversation about like too many
the Disney release,
too many Star Wars books constantly.
So fast, there's so many.
Yeah,
I know they're all coming, and it's like it's so thankfully. Well, I don't know how I feel about it, but there was supposed to be a Mandalorian novel, and then it got canceled, which is so sad. But there's no plans for one yet, so that I don't have to worry about that consuming my entire brain space.
Yeah.
But there's so much else. Like there's so many other things, and then it's like, at what point do I dedicate myself to canon versus Legends? Like Legends is just as worthy, but like at the same time, like it's not canon. So like, do I focus on canon? Like it's very hard as somebody who's like really just starting to fully dive into the transmedia.
Definitely,
it can be tricky.
It's not just a lake; it's an ocean. There's a lot.
Did you, when you were a kid,
exactly.
Did you grow up reading any particular Star Wars series? I grew up reading the Jedi Quest series from Scholastic. I remember at my school, whenever they did a book fair, I would always try and get the latest Jedi Quest book. And eventually, when Episode 3 came out, it was the last of the Jedi series that followed that series up. They were all Jude Watson books, and the first series that Jude Watson did was the Jedi Apprentice series, and that was like Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon. That went for like 29 books or something like that. It was huge. But did you grow up reading any of these? There was a Boba Fett series back in the day. Any of that?
Yeah, I feel like I have a very distant familiarity to it. I definitely don't think I like sat down and opened one of the books and read it, but my brother might have like read it, and then I'm his little sister, so I'm around it. He's spewing some of the content to me. I don't think though. I didn't sit down and read, which stinks. Like that's like the one aspect of Star Wars really that I didn't absorb is like the media that's in print, which is so sad. But I was weirdly familiar with like the Heir to the Empire trilogy. Like I knew who Thrawn was.
Well, those are the only important ones.
I knew who Mara Jade was. Yeah, especially right now.
Yeah, so true.
For this era we're tackling, but it's like I knew of this stuff, and like the same thing. Funny enough, like for Clone Wars, I watched episodes when they were on TV. Like I remember sitting in my kitchen, like watching them with my dad and stuff, like on Cartoon Network. Knew who Ahsoka was and stuff, but like I had to, as an adult, I had to go back and watch it to like refresh myself. But it was like in the back of my memories is like seeing it. So I was definitely probably exposed to books like that. Like Jedi Quest sounds so familiar, but I was not a very good, like I read stuff growing up, but I was always more interested in making stories than reading them, if you know what I mean. Like I was much more of like a storyteller than I was a story consumer in some ways, which is kind of funny, but yeah.
Fair enough. Did you get to keep anything? Your costume, any props, anything from the Halcyon Legacy, when it started to close down? Yeah.
I mean, listen, if Disney happens to be listening, Disney, I did not steal anything from you, and I really want to take a costume home, but I did not want to be on bad terms with Disney because they did treat me very well. But yeah, no, I didn't really like. And I think anybody or everybody had to end up turning in their costumes anyway. I really was tempted to keep it though. Like even just one, I'm like, I'm really gonna know, and I'm like, I don't need this heat on me. But I did get to keep my name tag.
Oh, okay, there you go.
Yeah, it'd been nice if Disney would have just like gifted those out if they were closing down.
Yeah,
because how cool would it be then to actually wear your staff like Halcyon costume to like Star Wars celebration and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that would be cool.
Yeah, I was like just thinking about that earlier. I'm like, man, if I like go to a con in the future, I really want to like just dress up as a Halcyon crew member. Like if I only had the costume, but I guess I know like exactly the texture of it and how to recreate it because I had to wear it, almost every day for 8 months. But
like
yeah, unfortunately, I didn't really get to keep anything like that. Yeah, it was the most comfortable thing. I don't know if it looks like it, but oh my goodness, it was so comfortable. We called them space pajamas because it really felt like you were just in your PJs. And especially for like me compared to like my parking lot costume was, still sizes from like the 70s and like textures from the 70s. So very like tight fitting or like hard weathered has been washed countless times. Going to graduating to the space pajamas, I was like, yeah, the only thing that stunk is then, Florida summer hits and I'm standing in Batu and the real feels like 106 degrees and I have long sleeve shirt and long pants.
Oh no.
Ooh, those are tough days.
Oh,
yeah, those are tough days. It was worth it, but those were tough days.
I think Josh and I actually have experienced that. We went to Celebration Orlando. We had to all stand up in this line of thousands of people in the parking lot. It was awful. People were passing out as we were trying to get in this building.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't blame them. It's brutal. I thankfully I don't think we had anybody pass out like either working or passengers that I can remember from heat. Even in the parking lot, I don't think anybody passed out, which is a wonder because that's literally the parking lot and you're on the blacktop all day.
Yeah, exactly. That's good.
But yeah, it was our leadership did a really good job. Like I said, everybody I worked with there is just incredible, and our leadership was really careful to make sure we were all taken care of. So if you were in that position in Batu, kind of like near the heat, you would kind of get rotated just to make sure you could like get a sip of water. They would bring us Powerade and stuff, so that we were hydrated.
There's no like staff people out there.
That position at Batu, like we had, and it's a transport ride, so. Yeah, literally. But the outpost on Batu, like Hollywood Studios and the Star Cruiser are not like right next to each other. Like it's a drive, not super long, but it is a drive. So the transports usually take like 7 minutes one way. So we're pretty disconnected. Like if you're on Batu, like working, you're disconnected from everything else at the Star Cruiser. So my managers were really good about making sure that we were getting taken care of and whatnot. So thankfully, all hydrated, so hopefully nobody worried about us too much. But there were definitely some times where I'm like, oh man, only I could be inside the ship. That would be great.
I gotta ask them because you say like about 7 minutes drive. So when guests aboard the Halcyon went on their day excursion to Batu, I'm assuming it was like a very immersive experience for that. Would you be able to explain sort of how that worked?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a part of my transportation line of business of one of the many I've aforementioned, and it's an extremely immersive experience getting them there. So we had a transport dock, the extension of the Star Cruiser, where passengers would be taking their transports up and down, up from Batu and then back down to Batu, however many times they wanted to between like a certain amount of hours. And it's this transport that has about, I think, 12 seats, if I remember right, from my training. Hopefully my trainer knows and is proud that I remember that. And it's 12 seats in each transport, and there was, I think, gosh, I don't remember how many there were of them, but the passengers would be able to either sit in the seats, and then we could allow 4 people to stay standing if necessary, pack them in there. But it's like, I don't even know how to describe the transports to you. They're just so immersive, so beautifully crafted. It really feels like you're in a transport. And there's audio playing, and they play some songs, to interlude. There's a droid in there. My coworkers are gonna make fun of me because I always forget his name because he's the Batu droid. But he like does a little spiel about like going down to Batu and what's happening on Batu. And when you come back, he like tells you, oh, I hope you weren't a part of those explosions, over Batu, which is the Rise of Resistance, like hat tip.
Right.
And then like probably something about Hondo and stealing coaxium and whatnot. Because that was a story element on the Halcyon, which is pretty cool. And yeah, but the transport's very immersive. Of course, again, nothing to the outside because they don't want you to know where we're driving. Because you do have to drive through like what we call like, backstage to get there. You don't go through the front of the park.
So it's a highly immersive vehicle.
It was really cool.
It's like Star Tours on wheels, pretty much, I guess.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And we had ways to get around it if people were very concerned about getting motion sick because there are no windows and you're sitting like sideways and whatnot. But I don't think we ever really had any major issues. And my dad, who's very motion sick person, like when we went on, he was totally fine.
Oh,
but
good.
Okay.
yeah, it was it's very highly immersive. I wish I had could have a way to show you. It's just what I have in my brain. It's crazy.
I remember seeing a video where the guests came out of like a special tunnel like into Galaxy's Edge. Like, is that was there like a?
Yeah.
I'm assuming that there was like a dock that
concrete corridor you're talking about.
Yeah. I think is it by like Kylo Ren's shuttle or something like?
Yes. So we call it Docking Bay 3, and it's still there in Walt Disney World. It just can't go past a certain point because we had to have like a Disney-esque touch point out there to make sure that we could let the appropriate people in on and off the ship. So nobody's trying to sneak in. That's the biggest point of our position there, just to make sure that we're taking care of our passengers who are currently on this voyage and whatnot. It's all about safety, and at the end of the day, that's the most important part. But you would get off your transport, and it would be this exclusive area that nobody else gets to see except Halcyon passengers, and it's basically a little tunnel, and it comes out into this big open Docking Bay 3 that is open to day guests usually, unless we were there. And it's right next to Kylo Ren's tiny echelon, and it brings you right out there by like the First Order outpost where you buy your First Order merchandise. And there really wasn't like a ton to it. It had some cool signage and whatnot, but now it's completely closed off. They did just have the gate closed, but people started doing Halcyon tributes, and Disney like kind of put a barricade of like barrels and stuff there, so you can't even go into the little nook anymore. But I think that's because they use that passageway now for helping to get characters through. Again, this is all coming from like my thoughts because I haven't even been working at Disney since we closed. So like that's what I just assume is they're using that pathway to help characters get through more quickly.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But yeah, it was a pretty cool like little.
I'm wondering what they did with a lot of the stuff, if they auctioned it off, or like specifically with the speeders they use to get back and forth, or the transports.
Well, they probably still have them.
Part of me hopes Bob Iger just took one and he just drives around.
This is family minivan.
That's right.
Please, yeah. Oh, that'd be so funny. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, if you put me back there and let me drive past the building, I could probably give you an answer. But I'm not there now, so I really don't know if they're still around.
We'll just have to speculate.
Yeah,
I have no idea. Yeah, I have no idea what's going on with anything in that space. My secret hope that is like total conspiracy theory. Like nobody should ever think I got this intel, quote unquote intel, because I worked there. But I really wanted them to film something there, like
I mean, it's already
do a scene of the Mandalorian Grogu movie in the Starcruiser. We used to joke and call it like a multi-million-dollar movie set. It's already built.
Yeah,
like it's already got all the elements. There's very little you'd have to do in post. Like you just have to erase like the glowing exit signs and stuff that you have to have for safety code. Like that, I feel like it's very little. It's built for you, and also like Chandrila Starline, the New Republic capital has to temporarily move to Chandrila at some point, and there's a lot of storytelling opportunity for the New Republic era at least to really cover it right now.
Oh, totally.
So my clown conspiracy theory has been like maybe they're gonna film something there, and then upon them filming there, releasing it, people will want to go and see it.
Yeah,
I don't know. That's my theory. I would love to see that happen. Yeah, but I honestly I can promise you 100% that's just me being a fan speculating. Like I got nobody, that was never mentioned anywhere.
So if you don't know any official reason, what is your speculation as to sort of why this experience closed? And sadly, a lot of fans who, weren't able to go sort of while this was open may have lost hope at this point as to, possibly ever going again, since there's no news on whether this thing is going to come back. So
or anything similar.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe if you have a moment to sort of elaborate on, what it was like, I know we chatted briefly about this before we started recording, but what it was like when that thing, when you got the news of it closing, and, sadly, I mean, all of you guys, sucks to lose your job. I mean, it's, it must have been a pretty crazy day.
Especially such a like dream of a job.
Yeah, totally.
Honestly. Like it's so cool and immersive to be part of that.
Yeah, really. Going back to that day, I can only really describe it as a fever dream. Because we had, of course, we're in the middle of a work day. We didn't have passengers at that point because, every once in a while we would have to have a break just to do maintenance, stuff like that, just keep the ship. And a lot of us happened to be gathered there, and we had done some, crew celebrations and stuff just to kind of, boost morale as we're going through some additional training and whatnot. And we're talking about how amazing our performance is, because really, like, you can look it up anywhere where we were doing amazing numbers for the Walt Disney World Company, like just across the board. And the leadership all of a sudden just kind of started getting pulled out of meetings. And I was like, oh, this seems really strange. And a lot of my coworkers were all part of the not all of us, but like probably 90% of passenger services crew were Disney College program. So we all had program end dates. Mine was August. I think my official day was August 10th, something like that. So and that was an extension. I was supposed to leave at a certain day, and then I extended it as far as I could. So I already had a day where I knew I was probably gonna have to leave, but I was thinking about, trying to go full time and staying because I loved it so much.
Yeah.
So we're all kind of just sitting and waiting, and then we were told to gather in the atrium, which is like, the big lobby, and it's every department, entertainment's there, we're there, there's all the other collections, the culinary, whatnot. There's a lot of moving parts there, and it's unfortunately not everybody who worked there, because not everybody had to be there for this training. And we were told about not too long before the general public knew, like it was about to go live on the internet. I'm not really sure what happened there. I don't know if it was an official press release or, got leaked. Things happen. But I am glad they at least made the effort to tell us before it hit everything.
Yeah, for sure. But much better than.
But yeah, we they didn't. Yeah, exactly. It wasn't sugar coated. They told us, hey, like, really, this sucks, but this is what's happening. It's closing on this day, and let's go talk about it. So we all kind of broke back into our respective teams. So passenger services stuck together, and they let us ask questions. But at that point, I think they also realized that we just wanted to sit with the news. The hardest part was the fact that we had to go to work the next day. And everybody, all eyes were on us. And again, this is when leadership was so supportive, and they were like, listen, we know this is going to be hard, and if you just need to step away for a second, just let us know and we'll try to cover you. Because I was one of the first employees to come in the next day, and there's like tissue boxes, and like it's like very haunting sight of sadness. So I'm like picking all this up to make sure that everything looks good. But yeah, and that is the day, I know I referenced this before I started recording, that's the day that our audio stopped working, was that first day after.
Wow.
Oh, man.
And we were joking, we're like, so the Halcyon's fighting back. But yeah, that's really what it was. It wasn't anything like, and I did feel very bad though for my coworkers who weren't there, because just by chance, they had to find out from the internet. So our work group chat's getting messages like, is this real? And those of us who were there like, and they're, more Disney College program kids who are about to come in. So we're like, are they still going to come? Like, are we the last ones? It was very up in the air, because a lot of them, their programs wouldn't even end till like January, February of 2024. So, these are these kids that we're expecting to work for a long time. Yeah, that's how it felt for us too. If it makes you feel like as out of nowhere as it felt for the general public, that's how it felt for at least me.
I was just wondering, as far as like visitors coming coming in, like if there was any sort of like drop off and noticing of like attendees before this happened, or if it like was just completely blindsided.
Yeah, I mean, it really didn't seem like it was much different than it had been ever since I started working there. I know that like a week or two after I started working there is when they announced that, we were going to have to cancel some voyages just to do some maintenance and stuff. But that was, general public, everybody knew that. They knew that at the same time I knew that. So that I didn't really know what that meant. I just was like, okay, yeah, we got to do maintenance. Like this thing's been around for almost a year. There's chipped walls, she's getting a lot of love. I'm not really sure if there was anything else behind that. I'm my position, I was very base level. There wasn't really much I knew that the general public didn't know. So I personally didn't really notice anything unusual. And that's really what made it weird is if anything, it seemed like we were doing really well, especially from what we were discussing, with how well our performance was. And yeah, so there really wasn't any strong indication that was the path that was going to get taken. And that's why it was such a shock for all of us who, were passenger services crew. And I have to say though, at least the positive of it is how close it really brought a lot of us who were working at that time. That night, like a bunch of us who lived at exactly. A lot of us who lived at Disney's housing that they provide for the college program kids, we all got together and just kind of talked through everything. And that's honestly a nice memory I have because it's nice. Our saying is like, on our crew, rest our success is one of the sayings around the ship. And so like that was a huge thing. Our ship is only as strong as its bond. So it's like seeing that actually kind of play out. It was like a bittersweet result of what had happened, but it was very surreal, that whole stretch of time from the closure announcement. And I can also tell that our amazing, incredible general manager, who's one of the most amazing people I know, like there's no other word I can describe him with. He was just gutted too. Like you could just see it on his face that he probably hasn't known that this was going to happen for long either. So he's one of the most caring bosses I've ever had. I don't even like, if he heard me call him a boss, like he'd be like, don't say that, because he was very insistent on making us all feel equal. But he is very empathetic. So it was a hard day for us, but it was a hard day for him. And I honestly don't know how long he knew before we did, just based on his reaction.
I certainly hope that they did what they could to try and keep as many people employed as possible in other positions around the park, right? I mean, that's my hope at least, because that's a lot of positions just to be chopped like so fast,
Yeah, and so abruptly too.
Yeah. To my knowledge, everybody was taken care of in terms of everyone who was going to be working at the time that we closed was going to be offered, a position somewhere else in Disney World at the resort. Whether, the only sad part is they're splitting up. These people who have been working together since a few months before opening, now, they were like a family and they're being split up. So that was really the most heartbreaking part for a lot of the crew. And I feel almost like, not like guilty, but almost guilty that, I got out of there like right before the closure happened. So I never really had to worry about it, about the, the unknowns of what's it going to be like and having to see the stuff standing there. But at the same time, it was like ripping the Band-Aid off, knowing like, man, I'm so close to the end and I'm not working it. But yeah, everybody was taken care of. I would say what wasn't very helpful, but people can't help but they're curious. That's the question we kept getting asked from that day forward, is at least once on every voyage, it's a passenger being like, so what are they going to do with you when this is closed? Or what are they going to do with this place when it's closed? And I'm like, man, what do you, and especially in an immersive environment, like, please don't ask me that. How am I supposed to answer that? So, we had to have discussions on how we respond to that in story, so we're not breaking immersion. And, it's just, you want to enhance the passenger experience. You don't want to focus on a negative when these people are, paying all this money to come and have this life-changing experience. You don't want to be like, oh, yeah, I don't know what my job's going to be. You don't need a trauma dump at work.
I almost think they should have introduced a new storyline, which was the Halcyon's last voyage. So then you can kind of
Well,
I mean, I used to I don't know if I had the creative freedom to do this, but I sometimes would joke because in the Lego Star Wars summer vacation special, we had a pool deck, but we never had a pool. So I used to be like, I hope that I heard we might be closing for renovation just to get a pool. But then some people think legitimately that's what's happening. They're like, oh really? Is that why it's happening? I'm like, no. Like, I'm sure somebody's gonna hear that and be like, "Molly, gosh."
I'd love to like get a whole spreadsheet of just everyone's, everyone who worked aboard the Halcyon, just like, what do you think happened to the Halcyon? I'm sure a number of people probably put it on the list that it's in the mix of all those ships at the end of episode 9, showing up for that one last fight. Maybe it's out there somewhere.
Oh gosh, yeah. You saying that just reminds me, we had a massive headcanon about that. A massive headcanon that we were in the battle, the Battle of Exegol.
That's awesome.
It could be. There's so many ships in there. I love to think that. But yeah, we definitely all, tried our best to make light of it. So sometimes, making kind of ridiculous stories was our way of coping with what was going to happen. So while we were smart enough to not, say that in front of people, in front of passengers, it was something that made us feel a little bit better behind the scenes. Yeah.
Do you because this experience is it was so ambitious, and again, like I think I may have said it earlier, like it's just almost hard to believe it ever happened. But do you ever see this sort of happening again? I mean, obviously, like this is all speculation, and I mean, one can only guess as to what they'll do with sort of everything they've built there. It's just sort of sitting there gathering dust, but. I mean, what sort of like future do you see in this kind of entertainment? Having now worked in the theme park business, and what kind of future would you hope that this sort of attraction has brought in terms of positive feedback that they can now roll out to something else that might be perhaps more successful in their vision, for the future?
Yeah, I think. Well, first of all, huge hands off to everybody who brought this to life, because this is the first of its kind, like a multi-day, multi-night.
Yeah.
Completely immersive experience, like absolutely brilliant. It just, and nobody ever left that experience with like the bitter taste in their mouth that some people have for it having not gone, which again, I totally understand that, because it's not really clear what goes into it, so I can't really hold that against people for being like, oh, it's too expensive for a hotel. It's like, I get it, it's not just a hotel though.
Yep.
But I think they already kind of in a way like played around with like a shortened version, because they wanted to in the final weeks make sure that crew members got to say goodbye and whatnot, and bring like one or two family or friends to see it. So there are arrangements made, and like they're able to do like a dinner and like a show. I think,
just
again, I wasn't there. Yeah, exactly, some sort of experience. So I think that now they can learn to, because I think maybe the part they were hurting in the most is like the length of it. Like it was just so long. Like people were there for 2 days. It's just, and then that requires a lot of money on both ends. So I don't know if monetary things were the issue. If that's the case, then doing a shortened version that's maybe like you pay for this multi-hour experience would totally still be worth it.
Right. Yeah.
The only downside with that is you don't get the bond with the characters as much, because one of the most rewarding parts of doing multiple days is like by the end of your last day, like Wraith Cole knows me by name, and Blanca Mock is like able to thank me and by name, and so those special relationships can't get as deep, but I think that can be stacked. Yeah, but I definitely think they've learned what the weak points are of something like this, what the strong points are. I don't think in any case it was a failure, and not that like this has been insinuated, but I don't think it should ever be really regarded as a failure, because it did like open this perspective and like experiment. They did it. They went out on a limb and they did it. Yeah.
That's
it's a huge win.
It's really being willing to like try stuff out. That's really beyond what anyone else would think is capable for technology and availability now.
100%. And everything that went into this was nothing but like love and passion and like a true just like drive for making new experiences, for changing people's lives, for telling stories. Every single person I talked to, no matter what level of what they were involved with, if they wrote the story, they made the technology, like all they wanted was to just see this dream come alive, which made it all the more harder after that day of learning about the closure and meeting some of these people and being like, oh, it's just horrible. But it's not for nothing. It was never for nothing. No, I know that there are lessons being learned and something is going to happen. I don't know what it is, but I know they'll figure it out because they were able to do this. And
I think you're totally right in the sense that it was a success because, it's basically just taking the magic of Disney and infusing it into Star Wars, you know, and giving that to the theme parks. And I know on like I don't know how many of the behind the attraction videos or documentaries on Walt Disney that you've seen, but I've frequently sort of heard this opinion of Walt, you know, always wanting to have Disneyland be immersive to the guests, right? And I feel like this just successfully took this, you know, whether it was a financial success or not, it successfully took the guests to that next level of immersion, you know.
Oh yeah, unquestionably.
And I feel like it was sort of the crown jewel, even though it only lasted for like 2 years, maybe at best. Like, you know, it feels like it was always ever going to be, this is like the pinnacle of what we can do for guests, you know, at the parks. And, you know, and it's amazing to think that that's what happened, you know, for a brief period of time. Yeah.
It was a very lofty goal,
absolutely.
for sure.
And that was a point that came up a lot, was what was Walt Disney's original intent? It was that immersion, and like that word I used earlier, play, like letting people feel like they can just play again, like they're kids.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what it was people who could just come and like literally be in space and just forget the outside world existed for 2 days.
Just big immersive
That's exactly what would
sandbox.
happen.
Yeah.
That was Star Wars themed.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why, again, like the May 4th voyage was the perfect example of that. It's just, you stuck out if you weren't dressed in the most gorgeous cosplay. Like, it just was amazing.
And I think that's
what
a
I
good
saw,
flag.
and, you know, I will never forget. Yeah.
Because if they do anything like this again,
Sorry, go ahead.
if they ever do anything like this again, that's Star Wars fan or like Star Wars themed, the big fans like Josh and I, anyone who wants like the full immersive experience, make sure you go May the 4th, because that's when everyone's going to be there.
That's when it's happening.
The full immersion experience.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Molly, I gotta ask if there's any social handles that you'd like to share. You know, feel free to share those at the moment, and I can also put them in the description. But is there anywhere that audiences can perhaps like look you up and follow your stuff?
Yeah, really just, I'm pretty active on Twitter these days, or X, I guess. Molly Brizzell is me on Twitter. And then if you're interested in reading some of my Screen Rant stuff, you can look me up on Screen Rant, same name, Molly Brizzell, and look at some of my pieces, and hopefully you will find my little Halcyon pieces I've written. So maybe those little Easter eggs, and get to know the characters of the Halcyon, and get to know what it was like the day the Halcyon closed on the news side. So look around for those.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and again, feel free to send me those, and I'll link them down below. But yeah, Molly, thank you so much for coming on and joining us, and you know, having this chat. I mean, we've been so excited to hear all about your experience and working with the Halcyon and all that.
We've been wondering about this whole thing since it started. We really were excited to get some firsthand details.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much for giving me the platform to do it and to get to talk about it again. This experience was, you know, a dream for me, and I can only wish that every Star Wars fan could have experienced it in both, you know, honestly, the passenger and the worker side. It was just amazing from start to finish. So thank you for letting me talk all about it. It really means a lot, especially from such a positive direction. It's just very meaningful. Oh,
absolutely. And you're always welcome back. I mean, I'm sure, you know, whenever there's more Mandalorian stuff that pops up, maybe that movie, perhaps we can get you on again. And you know, I mean, we got you in the Discord now. So anytime that you see a subject pop up that you want to be a part of, just pipe up in the chat, and you know, we'll get you back on again.
Oh, absolutely. You see Mandalorian in the title and you guys need a guest, you just let me know.
Will do.
Absolutely. All right. Well, big thank you again, Molly and Blake, and we will see you in the next one.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you again, Molly. Just want to put on our
yeah, of course. Thank
thanks.
you.
All right.
Yeah, of course. And thank you.
We'll see you out there. Keep flying.
All right, and a big thank you to our audience for tuning in thus far. Make sure you go check out those links in the description below. Go look up Molly and her articles and her socials, and once again, for all those of you who are following all our other episodes, make sure you shoot us an email. Just get in touch with the podcast, and we love those 5 stars. We love to see that. As always, we'll see you in the next episode of Star Wars Escape Pod, and may the Force be with you.